And we are jumping right into the second panel discussion today, Practical Solutions for Food Fortification, Global Lessons Learned. And it's a blended session with the participation from researcher, practitioners, international company representatives. First, we'd like to welcome onto stage Dr. Trần Khánh Vân, medical doctor and head of Micronutrients Department, National Institute of Nutrition's Ministry of Health. Dr. Vân has served as a focal point for food fortification program and the scaling up of nutrition's business network here in Vietnam. She is a member of the core group to develop important nutrition policies, such as the National Strategy for Nutrition and National Plan for Action for Nutrition, nutrition labeling, and nutrition reference intake. We are going to connect with different panelists from all around the world. We have Dr. Klaus. He is from the Global Application Specialist Food Fortification and Technical Support of BASF. I believe that he is in Germany right now. Is he?
I believe so.
I believe so. I think that the company has been here since 1994. And by 2009, they have the office in both Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, and has the operation in the country since then. About Dr. Klaus, since 1985, he has worked in the food ingredient industry for Danish food ingredient companies like Danishco or Danish Sugar and Chris Hansen within development and application technology. During the past 20 years, he has visited companies, ministries, and NGO in more than 40 countries in 6 continents, implementing food fortification projects. We also have the connection with Lucy Kleffeld. She is a partner at Hystra, and Lucy leads its practice on marketing for low-income clients and last-mile distribution. She has supported over 60 companies in designing and improving their business model. I think that she is connecting with us all the way from France. And Mr. Rizwan Yushifali from Ignite Program Director, Techno Service and Millers for Nutrition. He is also connecting with us virtually. And I would like to double check with Tiago. We have Dr. Kai here with us. Dr. Kai from DSM. Maybe due to a very busy schedule, she cannot be here with us today. She is here. Please give her a round of applause. Yeah, she is here with us. So Dr. Kai Lin Ek, she's APAC Head of Science, Human Nutrition and Care at DSM. It's a purpose-led global science-based company in nutrition, health, and bioscience. Okay, so the stage is yours, Tiago.
Thank you very much. You can hear me? Yes. Okay, so let's run the numbers again. The numbers and myself, we have a relationship. So if you were attentive, if anything else, you must have learned how many countries we have in the world. Anyone knows? Everybody knows for sure. How many? Many countries in our beautiful planet. Come on. We have said this plenty of times. So
196, 95.
195, 94. So let's leave it like this. So of these 190 plus countries, 142 currently mandate the fortification of either maize flour, edible oil, rice, salt, or wheat flour. We have discussed this extensively during the panel. This is 70%, a little bit more, of all the countries in the world that have some type of legislation or implementation program for fortification. Does this mean that the next 30% or the last 30% of our countries, of the countries in the world, need to fortify, need to use specifically this tool? Well, food fortification is one tool. It's not a silver bullet, like it was said here many times. Many other tools that are important to reach the objective of eliminating the so-called hidden hunger in the world, which is the lack of micronutrients in the diet of our populations. So we will focus on this panel on what was identified and how it was executed, all the challenges that these countries faced since, well, I think we can mark, I have very important people here that can correct me and that can add to what I've say. But 2002 was an important mark on this road. So Food Fortification Initiative was launched. And at that time, this is 2002, we had only 38 countries with mandated fortification of one of these foods that we are discussing, wheat flour, maize flour, rice. At present, we have 94. This is that have active legislation about this. This is a huge success. It is a huge success. It's a long road that we have been treading. It's a very well executed roadmap and a strategy that has great success. The question is, despite all of these achievements, food fortification, as we know and we have discussed, has not yet met its potential to impact on a global scale. I am a positivist. I think we are not so far, and it's not so difficult to improve. But there's a road in all these countries. All these countries having this the legislation or following any type of fortification program does not mean that they are implementing it well, right? So we discussed briefly Vietnam example. Many examples throughout the world that you really have legislation, at least implementation, and we fall short in one of the sides. Either the industry does not abide or we don't monitor it properly. So some challenges, and the practical experience of our guests will highlight this. So what are the lessons learned? Sorry. What are the lessons learned, and how can we achieve, if not anything else, if not more countries that participate in these programs, that implement these programs, how can we achieve 100% compliance into the committed countries? So with us online, as introduced, Dr. Klaus Sondergan, Riz Yusufali, and Lucy Klarsvet. Thank you for coming, for participating. Even online, your participation is very valuable. And here with me, Dr. Kai and Dr. Van, respectively, DSM and Vietnam Institute of Nutrition, to help us think and sharing your ideas and your experience into these programs. So, starting with Histra, Lucy, welcome.
Thank you.
So Histra is a consulting company, plenty of experience in this field. Lucy, if you could tell us a short introduction of yourself. What is your role in Histra that somehow addresses the discussion of this panel? We can then go to the roadmap and the participation on the food fortification journey. So it was so the foundation in 2009 of Histra until. Let's give it a bit more a broader view. As you know, one of the latest Sustainable Development Goals, zero hunger, is one of the very demanding goals and very hard to achieve. So, Lucy, welcome.
Thank you very much. I'm really glad to be part of this panel. I might be a bit of a nod, maybe not UFO, but another one on this panel because I've mostly worked on targeted nutrition and fortification of one product at a time. But glad to see if there can be some lessons that can be learned in between the two sectors. So at Histra, we're a consulting company. We've been supporting either large corporations or small companies in thinking through how they could fortify further products that they have on the market. and how they can then market them better and really get a good market share thanks to the fortification they're offering. So we've done that both partnering with large corporations on a program that was funded by the Gates Foundation, and also supporting smaller companies through a 5-year program in West Africa, where we worked with local companies in Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali to support local companies who offered products that were relatively widely consumed, think through how they could offer slightly different SKUs, slightly different products, which would be specifically targeted for women, and also how they could potentially produce infant flour fortified as per the requirements of 6 to 24 months old children. So that's on the company support side. The other type of work we've been doing in nutrition has been working also with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation on an initiative to support the fortification of bouillon, which is has similar statistics of consumption as rice in Vietnam, in West Africa, trying to see if there could be legislation set up to for voluntary fortification and then later mandatory fortification in several countries of West Africa. So very excited to be here and to learn from everyone on the panel.
Thank you very much. Well, the work of specializing consulting companies and history being so many, having so long program and influence on this fortification journey. So it's very valuable. Thank you for coming. Going to my colleague that is very close to us from Dr. Kai. So from DSM. DSM is a micronutrient supplier, has a long history with the fortification programs, with micronutrients fortification and others. So Dr. Kai, maybe introduce yourself, your role in DSM, and what has been the roadmap, the DSM roadmap on the food fortification journey. I know it's a long one. You will try to be succinct for sure. Since the 20th century, we spoke in many details about one of the first successful fortification programs. So the salt iodization, the iodine in salt. To the same question as for Lucy, what is your commitment and or your participation on the zero hidden hunger objective of the latest sustainable goals?
I'm going to see if does this mic work? Hi, good afternoon. So I'm Kailin. If you got a name card for me, it'll say head of STA, but STA actually stands for Science Translation and Advocacy for APAC. So I'm a trained dietitian. I have a PhD in human nutrition from Sydney University. But science translation in the DSM world means that I leverage so-called this academic experience to communicate the importance of nutrition and the benefits of course, food ingredients as well as micronutrients in an accessible way. And of course, in this role, I'm responsible for advocacy of nutrition-based approaches to healthcare in the APAC region. So while DSM Firmenich, of course, like what Tiago said, has been in this for very, very long, I'm fairly new to DSM Firmenich, having joined the company about 6 months ago, but I've always worked in the human nutrition field. It's something that's very passionate about, and I have experience in running this human nutrition intervention studies in APAC. And what I heard this morning about testing efficacy and the outcomes of some of the nutrition improvement programs, I hope that I can be able to, or DSM Firmenich will continue to contribute in this field as well as the current activities that we are involved with. So while I have yet to be on ground, to be personally involved, I know the commitment that the company has and the competencies that we have in this space. And of course, I'm delighted to be invited on this panel. Yeah. So back to your question, try to keep it short. Of course, our roadmap is very aligned with this SDG ambitious goal, SDG 2 of the Zero Hunger, which is very related to SDG 3 about good health and well-being, and then SDG 17 to be able to do it in partnership. And I think this is why we are also having this conversation here today, to find out each other's competencies, how else can we partner, and not that I'm here to talk that much about what DSM has, but I do want to share the competencies that we have in order to discover new projects. I think Tiago and myself had a conversation earlier on how else can we support each other in rolling some of these initiatives out. So our overall mandate is, of course, collaborating to end malnutrition with these nutrition interventions. And I think this morning it was important when they talk about large-scale food fortification, it's not being the silver bullet. I think there's other ways and means as well. And the three main pillars in our mandate is one, of course, closing the micronutrient gap. Two, I think there was some mention about it, about quality. And I think that's another part where we can work together. And three, for us to invest in the future to make malnutrition a thing of the past. And that, of course, requires investments in innovation, investments in collaborations as well. So in terms of closing the micronutrient gap, where do we have this skill and competency to support is that we see, of course, large-scale food fortification as having the biggest impact, and the fortification of staple foods that does not require this behavioral change. And if you ask for specifics, in 2021, the company also launched specific and measurable food system commitments. I won't go into details, but it includes a target to close this gap of 800 million people by 2030. The second point of putting quality, of course, we strongly emphasize that effective fortification is affordable, but ineffective fortification is expensive. So I think with that, we hope to support in this space on quality and making sure that the fortification is effective. And I think Tiago also talked about it a bit earlier on about cost a bit. I'll give an example of a study that we did in the Philippines on iron rice fortification. So the report is actually published on the World Food Programme website in May 2023. But to talk about cost, in the report, it actually says that the price of the fortified kernel was determined to be competitive for use in the Philippines rice fortification program. So that program, though it was focused on iron, our default premix in the rice kernels also included 7 other minerals and vitamins in addition to iron. So it was still cost competitive, even though it included more. Yeah. So including more doesn't necessarily mean more expensive. And so that's my point on quality, and that's micronutrient supplementation. And of course, my final point is investing in the future, where we actively champion innovative and sustainable business models that center on, once again, this quality and cost-effective nutrition interventions. Yeah.
Thank you very much. We definitely will have, we'll need to continue our conversations, DSM, BSIF. I've really seen the efforts in innovation that the micronutrient supply have put on since the beginning of these programs until today. So, I mean, thank you for all the work. Obviously, you are an interested party in it, but without you, it would not also be possible to develop, to innovate, and to improve the micronutrients inclusion in our foodstuffs. Talking about the fortified kernels, on my example about the cost, I was mentioning, and my colleagues, panelists will understand what I'm saying. You will as well. I'm talking on imported fortified kernels. Make locally produced fortified kernels in your own plant has a much higher capex. Naturally, it's a different technology. It's not just a premix that you add. It's a new machinery and kind of a complex process. So bear in mind that the costs I did mention were for imported fortified kernels. Why imported? Because it's the fastest way to start to implement your fortification program. As simple as that. It's a faster project, faster to implement. Easier on capex. So Going to Dr. Van now, if you, next to Dr. Kai, so if you would introduce yourself and Vietnam Nutrition Institute roadmap. So we have in great detail listen with the previous panelists on the roadmap for food fortification implementation in Vietnam. The decree is from 2016. So what has been this journey? What is the active part that Vietnam Nutrition Institute has been playing for now? Then we go for a bit more details.
Vâng, xin cảm ơn anh Tiago. Và tôi xin phép sẽ nói bằng tiếng Việt. Tôi cũng làm việc ở Viện Dinh dưỡng 30 năm. Và trong cái thời gian đấy thì tôi tập trung rất nhiều vào các cái nghiên cứu về thiếu vi chất dinh dưỡng, về các cái can thiệp để phòng chống thiếu vi chất dinh dưỡng ở Việt Nam, cũng như là các cái giải pháp về giáo dục dinh dưỡng, các cái giải pháp tiếp thụ xã hội để mà thúc đẩy cái việc sử dụng các cái thực phẩm tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng ở Việt Nam. Và tôi cũng trong cái quá trình đấy thì tôi cũng được đề nghị của Bộ Y tế để tham gia vào rất nhiều trong cái việc cung cấp các cái cơ sở khoa học cho việc xây dựng các cái chính sách có liên quan tới tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng vào thực phẩm, các cái hướng dẫn quốc gia về phòng chống thiếu vi chất dinh dưỡng. Thế thì từ năm 2016 Việt Nam bắt đầu có cái chương trình cái nghị định bắt buộc tăng cường vi chất và dinh dưỡng vào thực phẩm. Nhưng mà trước đấy thì chúng tôi cũng đã triển khai các cái chương trình tự nguyện tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng vào thực phẩm, và chúng tôi cũng đã làm việc rất nhiều với các cái doanh nghiệp ở đây. Có rất nhiều doanh nghiệp ở đây thì các anh chị rất là quen đối với tôi, bởi vì trong suốt cái thời gian phải đến gần 10 năm thì tôi hỗ trợ cho các cái chương trình tự nguyện tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng vào thực phẩm ở Việt Nam. Và từ năm 2016 thì Chính phủ Việt Nam có cái chương trình bắt buộc tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng vào thực phẩm. Trong đấy thì có bắt buộc tăng cường iốt vào muối, và muối sẽ được sử dụng để sản xuất các cái thực phẩm khác. Muối iốt bắt buộc phải sử dụng để trong cái quá trình sản xuất các loại thực phẩm. Rồi bột mì phải bắt buộc tăng cường sắt kẽm, và bột mì tăng cường sắt kẽm được sử dụng để sản xuất các cái loại thực phẩm khác nữa. Và dầu ăn thì bắt buộc bổ sung vitamin A. Từ thời gian đó đến nay thì Việt Nam có rất nhiều những cái kiến nghị của các cái doanh nghiệp liên quan tới cái việc gọi là khó khăn trong việc triển khai các cái thực phẩm tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng, đặc biệt là sử dụng muối iốt và bột mì tăng cường sắt kẽm để mà sản xuất các thực phẩm chế biến sẵn. Thế thì chúng tôi cũng đã cung cấp các cái cơ sở khoa học cho chính phủ cũng như là các cái doanh nghiệp cho cái việc này. Thế và bên cạnh đấy thì với cái vai trò của Viện Dinh dưỡng thì chúng tôi cũng đã cung cấp cho chính phủ các cái số liệu về tình hình thiếu vi chất dinh dưỡng tại Việt Nam. Thì trong đó thì thiếu vitamin A, sắt, kẽm, iốt là các cái vấn đề thiếu có ý nghĩa sức khỏe cộng đồng ở Việt Nam. Mà sáng nay thì chị Vân chị có trình bày một cái các cái slide về tình hình thiếu vi chất dinh dưỡng ở Việt Nam. Và trong đó thì thiếu iốt thì chị có nói đến cái việc là không phải là cái slide đấy thực sự là không phải là thiếu iốt, mà là cái iốt, trung vị iốt niệu ấy thấp hơn, cái tỷ lệ thấp hơn so với lại cái mức khuyến nghị toàn cầu là 150 microgram trên lít. Thế thì tôi cũng xin là có một cái thông tin thêm như vậy. Thế thì trong cái quá trình thực hiện như vậy thì các cái bộ ngành, trong đấy cụ thể là Bộ Y tế, Bộ Nông nghiệp và Bộ Nông nghiệp và Phát triển Nông thôn có nhiệm vụ là xây dựng các cái văn bản dưới luật, dưới hướng dẫn các cái nghị định, các cái quy chuẩn quốc gia để hướng dẫn thực hiện cái nghị định tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng vào thực phẩm. Thì theo cái nghị định 15 năm 2018, tức là ban hành sau khi có cái nghị định 09 năm 2016 thì quy định rằng là mỗi bộ thì sẽ quản lý và ban hành các cái quy chuẩn Việt Nam liên quan tới cái lĩnh vực ngành hàng mà mình quản lý. Thế thì Bộ Y tế được giao nhiệm vụ là ban hành các quy chuẩn Việt Nam về tăng cường về vi chất dinh dưỡng được tăng cường vào thực phẩm. Bộ Y tế đã ban hành đầy đủ các cái quy chuẩn này. Thế nhưng mà đến tới năm 2021 thì mới có Bộ Nông nghiệp và Phát triển Nông thôn ban hành quy chuẩn Việt Nam về muối. Và trong đấy có nói đến là muối ăn, muối thực phẩm thì phải sử dụng iốt và có cái liều lượng iốt ở trong đó. Còn Bộ Công Thương thì đến nay vẫn chưa ban hành cái quy chuẩn về bột mì và dầu ăn. Và trong đó thì cũng chưa có quy định, và vì vậy cho nên là chưa có quy định về liều của sắt, kẽm bổ sung vào bột mì cũng như là dầu ăn, vitamin A bổ sung vào trong dầu ăn. Thế đấy là những cái còn đang trong cái quá trình sắp tới thì tôi nghĩ rằng là các cái bộ cần phải ban hành đầy đủ các cái quy chuẩn này và cần phải có cái kế hoạch để các cái doanh nghiệp có thể thực hiện được. Và bên cạnh đấy thì cũng phải có những cái làm việc với các cái doanh nghiệp để làm thế nào đấy tháo gỡ các cái khó khăn cho các cái doanh nghiệp trong việc xuất khẩu các cái thực phẩm có tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng, trong việc sản xuất các thực phẩm tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng cho trong cái sử dụng trong nước và xuất khẩu, cũng như là các cái vướng mắc về mặt hành chính, về mặt các cái giấy tờ mà cần phải cung cấp cho các cái nước mà Việt Nam đang xuất khẩu sang các cái sản phẩm thực phẩm sang theo như là các cái kiến nghị của các cái hiệp hội mà có liên quan. Thì tôi thấy rằng là hiện nay đấy là các cái vấn đề mà chúng ta đang phải đối mặt và cần phải giải quyết và cần phải có kế hoạch để thực hiện điều đấy. Xin hết ạ.
Thank you very much. I believe Vietnam faces the dichotomy that was referred, and that I totally agree, between voluntary fortification and mandatory fortification. So mandatory fortification for some foodstuffs, voluntary for others. Maybe the hybrid solution that was discussed by my colleague previously. We discussed on the challenges of rice fortification, highly dispersed production throughout the country. So again, we need to think creatively and to gather experiences and share them on how to best reach the value chain and the processing facilities depending on the foodstuff. So going forward, Dr. Klaus, thank you for coming. BASF, if another micronutrient supplier, extensive experience in the fortification, in this fortification journey since the early 2000s and before. Dr. Klaus, I guess you will introduce much better than I can ever introduce you. Many years of experience in these programs. Could you introduce yourself, your role in BASF, and your roadmap, similar to DSM, is long. Your roadmap on fortification programs in the world, and your commitments with commitment, idea, compromise, how you want to call it. Please present it the best you can with the zero hidden hunger, which is, after all, the objective.
Yeah. Well, I have been with the food fortification in BASF since 2003, more than 20 years. Since 2001, I started BASF. All the time with technical responsibility for anything related to food fortification. That means I have been in contact with all our customers around the world, seeing hundreds of mills, and not two are the same. So that means you cannot make let's say one introduction. So going to a mill, you need to assess the mill, you need to assess the equipment, you need to assess the laboratory and see what is the capacities there. And then you need to identify where to set up the fortification unit or the equipment that is needed. Also to see, is there something in the factory that can be used already? And as mentioned, there's a huge difference from big continuous production, for example, in an oil mill with the producing thousands of tons per day, or to a small producer that produces or fortify in batches in smaller tanks. So all is possible. We just have to go and assess everything and set it up together. So this is the way to success. And the reason we have focused there, we focus also a lot there is because successful fortification, we need to have a buy-in from all stakeholders like NGOs, like governments, like the ministries. Yeah, you name all. We cannot do it alone. We have to work together. But at the end of the day, it is the industry who's fortifying the food. So we have to be active in this area.
Thank you very much. Like you said,
Yeah,
and I
I think,
detailed on
yeah.
on the panel before this one. Not two meals are the same. It's exactly like that. And an IFC project is and knows that perfectly. And we want to implement and tailor-made our approach to our clients. For sure, we will not be able to do it without the persons that are in this panel, without the public sector, without the government, without the micronutrient suppliers and your capacity to innovate and to deliver proper quality products. So thank you for your introduction. Going now for Rizwan or Riz. So happy to have you on the panel, Riz. We didn't mention the coalition called Millers for Nutrition. You will better introduce than myself. But either BSF or DSM are a part of this coalition. Could you please introduce your work? So as I understood, Millers for Nutrition is very recent. It was launched last year, end of last year. Riz will explain us how it was born. Riz is the program director, Ignite program director. That could you please explain as well the major details, and works for TechnoServe, a very well recognized development agent, non-for-profit. So since the recent development of this coalition and the current status in the countries that the program focus on, by the way, sponsored as well by Gates Foundation, could you please introduce yourself and this amazing, fresh out of the oven projects that you are managing?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Diego, for giving us the opportunity to be on the panel, and good afternoon to all the participants. We can see some of the room here. Unfortunately, cannot attend in person, but there with you in spirit. As Diego introduced, my name is Rizwan Yusuf Ali. I'm the program director for an initiative. The project is called Inspiring Good Nutrition Initiatives Through Enterprise, which with a primary platform for delivery being Millers for Nutrition. I'll talk a little bit about that, Diego, to your question. But maybe for everybody's benefit, I'll first start with introducing TechnoServe. We are a nonprofit agency that has primary mission globally to work with and build better farms, businesses, and food processors. We're present in about 30 countries through these initiatives. And one of the projects that I'm leading is which I'm the director for, is Millers for Nutrition. A little bit about Millers for Nutrition. It's a coalition that brings together what we call strategic fortification partners, and they are founding agencies that are working on food fortification. I'm glad to see Klaus and our colleagues from DSM Firmenich. So BASF, DSM Firmenich, Newland Chemi, Piramal, Hexagon are part of this coalition, together with Sanku and BioNelite. These are the founding partners that have come together. And through this initiative, we're trying to, in the coalition, we have the strategic fortification partners as well as the millers. We're trying to put the milling sector to be center of food fortification. And the coalition aims to bring the best in class of expertise, knowledge, and services that are available globally closer to the businesses that are the champions for fortification. We are operating currently in 8 countries. So in Asia, we have Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, and Pakistan. And in Africa, we're starting out in Nigeria, Kenya, Tanzania, and Ethiopia. These are countries that are specifically chosen because they have a high population, but as well as a high burden of micronutrient deficiencies, with the core objective of improving fortification consistency and compliance across 3 primary food groups. So we're working with cereal flours, which is maize and wheat flour, rice, and edible oil, and looking at improving the fortification status of that. The coalition's aim is to grow both in terms of the fortification partners as well as millers. So with 8 countries, we eventually see this growing to be a global coalition. It's driven, so one of the things that you mentioned, which was very interesting, is out of the 194, 95 countries, 140 countries have mandatory regulations or voluntary standards for fortification. But often implementation lags primarily because millers face several challenges. There's insufficient government enforcement or regulation, which creates an uneven playing field. As well as when it comes to nutrition, there is very poor consumer demand. And these 2 areas collectively reduce the incentives for millers to fortify. So we focus on the millers through this project and try and build those incentives. Of course, working in each country closely with government-led priorities and legislation, and we try and align ourselves to existing efforts by our NGO partners, as well as governments and industry associations. So we will talk a little bit more, Tiago, about some of the specific successes, challenges later, but that's a brief introduction.
Thank you very much. I think we can continue with you. You just warm up your voice. Following your line of thoughts, and it was very clear, the coalition and TechnoServe work. Can you showcase a successful partnership you recently had? I know, Riz, that you were recently in India watching fortified canal producers and the sector, how it's organized. You were there with your hands on the field, speaking with the processors. So can you briefly showcase this experience you just had in India? So we are as well trying to focus a little bit on the rice fortification here. And one of the, for sure, many partnerships that you are managing right now, if you could enlighten us. Thank you.
Thanks, Diego. So yeah, I think since the focus is on rice for this meeting, it's opportune to talk about it. As I mentioned, we're targeting several food vehicles for fortification, but rice is very pertinent for us in India. Also because within Asia, India has launched, or the government through the Prime Minister directly has launched a very large rice fortification initiative, which is called the PDS system. It's providing rice to lower income households. In India being a big country, that adds up to a large volume. Almost government is trying to provide close to 40 million metric tons of rice through this channel, subsidizes it to lower income households as a nutrition intervention, which is quite a commendable effort, but there is quite a lot to do. So my visit to India recently, as you have mentioned, Tiago, in your previous, in your opening remarks, that rice fortification is is the next frontier of food fortification. We started with salt iodization, which is very simple. 80-90% of the world now has iodized salt. When you go to other food vehicles, fortification tends to be a bit more direct. You just take the nutrients and add it directly to the food vehicle. With rice, there are several additional steps. So you need to start with good quality premix. You then need to make good quality fortified rice kernels, and then have quality in blending these kernels consistently with rice. So the main observation we have in India, despite a big opportunity as an entry point, is there are still a number of challenges to overcome. Obviously, what I saw is with such a large program announcement, one of the things is there has been a huge influx of fortified rice kernel manufacturing facilities. There's been a lot of investment there. And then a number of rice millers that blend these fortified rice kernels obviously use this. But one of the challenges when you talk about cost, a key observation was with a large number of fortified rice kernel manufacturers, there is a lot of latent capacity. What our observation was, only about 20 to 30% of this capacity is utilized. So that's all the fortified rice kernel you need for the initial entry. And when you have these production facilities for fortified rice kernel that are not utilizing so much, their economics don't work out very well. And that is, I think, one of the lessons, I think, as we expand and consider both targeted as well as commercialization of rice fortification. It's an issue to pay attention to, is you need to sweat your assets or your investments properly and not have too much latent capacity. So one of the points which stuck with me, Diego, that you made is initially maybe many countries are jumping to local production of fortified rice kernel immediately, thinking that that's the cheapest option. It may not be the case. You could consider import. So that's one area we're working on in India, is to try and optimize the supply chain to see at what volume does it make it feasible to produce these kernels, and then where should we focus on just blending. And so with what happens with manufacturers is when the economics don't work out, the first thing that shrinks, so the emphasis on quality reduces. And it's a missed opportunity, because if you could utilize the assets properly, you could invest in higher quality FRK manufacturing facilities and do a better job. One of the comments colleague from DSM Firmenich made is fortification is not it's not expensive when done properly. It's only expensive when it's not done properly. So that's one area. The other area, then, what area? So we need to come up with solutions. It's what Technis is working on how to, understand supply chains better. We're trying to work with these FRK manufacturing facilities where we also bring in academia into this, and working with organizations like Delhi IIT and NIFTM to say, during the off season, how could these machinery be used to make other nutritious products? That's just one solution, but ideally you don't want to complicate that. You want to make the fortified rice kernel better. There are challenges around quality and consistency that need to be addressed. You talked about, how these things are dosed, whether it's volumetric or gravimetric, that need to be overcome. But ultimately, it all boils down to creating the necessary. First step to us is the incentive, whether it's fortified rice kernel manufacturers or premix suppliers, or ultimately the rice millers who blend the kernels to make the fortified rice. Create an enabling environment for them to reward good performance and to celebrate successes is one of the things through the Millers for Nutrition we're trying to do, and try and minimize the burden. Frequently across all food fortification vehicles, issue of costs comes in. And one thing we've learned working with the food processors across all commodities is there is a misconception that fortification, their industry is looking to make money off fortification. They're not trying to make money. They understand there is a marginal cost. And by fortifying, they're not going to grow their market so much. But what they do want is that it should not be a deterrent and it should not shrink their market. So if we can get to a point where it is either marginal or minimal investment or at a net sum for food processors, then we can go forward because they already have the market, they already reach consumers, and that's why we target companies. So these are some of the focus areas of our program in India. But also not to be discouraged too early in the program. I think that any initiative you start will initially have some challenges. It's important to overcome these challenges, bring in all the partners together, bring in the government perspective, bring in the consumer perspective into this and the industry, and connect that. That's what Millers for Nutrition is trying to do. There are solutions to technical challenges, but and initially there might be barriers, and then it's not to prematurely say something doesn't work. And I think overall speaking, that is perhaps we are at the cusp in Asia on that when it comes to rice. You know, the first slide you showed was 400 grams consumption per capita in Vietnam of rice. Almost 98% of the population eats rice. 20% is industrially processed. But if we could fortify that, we could have a huge impact. It is going to be a long road, not to be initially discouraged by any technical challenges. They can all be overcome.
Thank you so much for the very comprehensive answer. I guess your experience is fundamental for the development of such programs, and we will for sure continue to explore this on this panel. Lucy, can you enlighten us on one successful partnership that you recently helped craft or participated? History has a world of experience, as we discussed. I know the work with Gates Foundation, Helen Keller, GAIN. You for sure have one of recent experiences that can help us understand these challenges and some solutions. Thank you.
Thanks. Yes, happy to share maybe from a couple. One would be the Mariam project that I mentioned earlier, where we worked with the local companies in 3 countries in Sahel to help them fortify, and all the challenges you mentioned for mandatory fortification, having to really check the mills and understand the challenges, the individual challenges of companies, are true as well when you try to get them to propose a kind of commercial branded SKU that is fortified. What we found though is that in these countries, and I don't know what the situation is in Vietnam, but in West Africa, at the time when we started the project, and even now, there were very few products that were specifically targeted at women, not even talking about fortification, but simply very few products that referred to the fact that they were, for women. And just the fact of creating these, other SKU, for example, a fura, which is a kind of dairy drink, in Mali, but one version specifically for women, was actually creating a real interest from consumers. And then obviously the idea was to fortify it. So we helped the company fortify it appropriately for the specific deficiencies that women face. And from a commercial angle, that was very attractive for the consumers. So I completely agree with some of the things that were said about the fact that consumers are typically not ready to pay for staples that are fortified. If we work with slightly higher end is maybe not the right word, but products that people still consume regularly, but that are not the basic food, there is an opportunity to differentiate via fortification. and to do that in a way that still reaches a large number of people if we choose a product that's still very much part of the habits that people have. In that specific project, because you were asking about partnerships, I also completely agree with what has been said. It's very hard for any single party to change the status of nutrition and of how much fortification there are in products. It was a consortium between 6 or 7 organizations. We co-led the project together with a French NGO called GRET, which has local presence in this country and has been working in nutrition for over a decade as well. We had partners from the marketing angle, a company called Ogilvy. We had the partners from the consumer insight angle. We had, of course, technical partners, the IRD organization. We had measurement partners. I also agree with what you said, Thiago. If you don't measure, you don't really know what happens. So to make this kind of program successful, definitely a need to bring in all the different sorts of expertise around the table, as you shared. The one additional point I want to add is based on the more regulatory side experience we're currently having also with the Gates Foundation in Nigeria and in Senegal, trying to support legislation around bouillon fortification, is that we found that the words of government regulation and the word of the private sector don't always find it very easy to communicate and understand each other. The government very understandably looks at public health benefits. The private sector, just as you all said during this panel, looks at the bottom line of their business model. And even if it's a small percentage of the end price that we're asking to add as fortificants, if you look at it as a percentage of the margin, which is really what it will eat into for these companies, the additional cost of fortification is actually a much bigger percentage, of course, of the margin that these producers have, and hence it's actually quite a big deal for them, even when the cost seems very small compared to the overall product costs. What we found even in trying to advance regulatory fortification or make regulatory moves on fortification, having an in-depth understanding of the challenges of the private sector and really making sure to bring those to the government in a way that also speaks their language in terms of cost effectiveness of impact, for example, is an effective way to trigger that discussion and really make sure that the legislation then is not just desirable from a public health perspective, but also fully feasible from the companies that then have to implement it. Over.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Going for Kai on my right side. What about DSM? I mean, your work with WFP, for example, comes from a long time. Could you enlighten us or share one of your experiences in this long journey?
Happy to share about this. Of course, I represent the hard work of my colleagues who have been working with WFP for a very long time. I think we've been working with WFP since 2007, and it was announced in 2022 that this, of course, partnership will be further extended, and particularly to scale up this rice fortification worldwide for a further 3 more years. And of course, in the past 15 years, this work with WFP to expand the production, availability, and consumption of fortified rice has reached 20 countries and counting. I'll give the example of Bangladesh. So this is an initiative that has facilitated the inclusion of fortified rice in key national safety net programs, and of course, engaged businesses, or rather this private sector, to produce it locally. And in this initiative with WFP, it has supported more than 70 small and medium enterprises in Bangladesh to build their capacity to produce fortified rice, of course, which looks, cooks, and tastes just like ordinary rice, but of course includes these micronutrients. So the result, of course, is this 280 retail outlets across the country that now stock fortified rice, making it available. This initiative has directly benefited, of course, the local food processors and producers. The record was access to this fortified rice was 2,000 or 30,000 in 2013. And now the reach is 7 million in 2021 with access to fortified rice through social safety nets. I'm putting on my scientific hat to search the outcomes, of course. And then there is now also scientific papers published on these outcomes. And an example that I like to quote is from 2019, and it's talking about the effectiveness of micronutrient fortified rice consumption on anemia and zinc status amongst vulnerable women in Bangladesh. So the results of that was that, or rather they did a subset on 800 women, and they of course compared the women who receive fortified rice versus ordinary rice. And there was a significant reduction in anemia and a significant increase in zinc status, although not quite as significant as expected or hoped for. Of course, then it comes to questions on, then there is the significant reach with regards to distribution. And I think there's also, I think when we talk about millets for nutrition, continual work on this quality control, on how do we incorporate the fortified kernels or make the hot extruded kernels locally in order to make sure that we see even better numbers with curbing anemia and deficiencies.
Thank you very much, Kai. Going for Vietnam Nutrition Institute, let me challenge you and ask you, what is the position on rice fortification in Vietnam? We have discussed the mandatory aspects of other foodstuffs. Would be interesting, I think, to see the challenges that you have identified, maybe the successes or the setbacks that you have seen on rice fortification in Vietnam. We have discussed this is a very decentralized industry, so many processes dispersed throughout the country. We understand that. Can you add something else to this?
Vâng, gạo là một cái sản phẩm mà Việt Nam tiêu thụ, người dân Việt Nam tiêu thụ gần như hàng ngày. Và rất lâu trước đây thì tôi có một anh bạn lấy vợ người Việt Nam, anh người nước ngoài lấy vợ Việt Nam, và anh có nói rằng là ở Việt Nam ấy, gạo không phải là chỉ là một thực phẩm đâu, mà giống như là các bạn đang nghiện gạo. Tức là vài ngày không ăn cơm gạo thì là các bạn cảm thấy không chịu được, lại phải tìm cơm để ăn. Thế nên là nó giống như là nghiện gạo. Và đây là một cái thực phẩm lý tưởng, khá là lý tưởng để nếu mà tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng vào đấy. Thế thì về cái kinh nghiệm của tôi đối với lại gạo thì tôi sẽ nói sau. Nhưng mà tôi có cái kinh nghiệm đối với việc làm việc với các cái doanh nghiệp trong cái lĩnh vực mà tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng và thực phẩm. Thì cái thời gian mà trước năm 2015 là tôi hỗ trợ cho các cái doanh nghiệp, rất nhiều các cái doanh nghiệp lớn ở đây sản xuất các cái thực phẩm tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng tự nguyện. Thì tại cái thời điểm đấy, khi mà kết thúc cái chương trình ấy, thì khoảng 60% cái market share, cái thị phần của cái hạt nêm thì đã được tăng cường các cái loại vi chất dinh dưỡng khác nhau, và đấy là hoàn toàn tự nguyện. Tăng cường vitamin A, tăng cường sắt, kẽm vào các cái loại hạt nêm khác nhau. 20 triệu người dân Việt Nam vào lúc cái thời điểm mà chúng tôi điều tra là 20 triệu người dân Việt Nam đã tiếp cận được với các cái thực phẩm tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng, và 43% những cái người mà được điều tra thì đã nhắc lại được các cái thông điệp cũng như là nhận biết ra cái logo của cái chương trình tự nguyện tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng thực phẩm ở Việt Nam. Đấy là một cái thành công, và tôi thấy là đấy là có một sự đồng hành của các cái doanh nghiệp. Và khi chúng tôi thấy rằng là nếu các cái doanh nghiệp đồng lòng mà thực hiện thì chúng ta hoàn toàn có thể thực hiện được, ngay kể cả là chương trình tự nguyện tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng và thực phẩm. Thế còn đối với gạo tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng và thực phẩm ấy, thì do là Việt Nam là các cái nhà xay sát là tương đối nhỏ lẻ, và ở các cái xã thôn thì đều có các cái nhà xay sát, và người nông dân, 80% người dân Việt Nam là nông dân, cho nên người ta tự sản xuất các cái gạo sử dụng. Và do đó thì là rất là khó để mà kiểm soát liều. Thế nhưng tuy nhiên không phải là chúng ta không có cơ hội, bởi vì là chúng tôi đã tiến hành các cái nghiên cứu đánh giá cái cảm quan cũng như là thị hiếu của người tiêu dùng, thì thấy rằng là các cái lứa tuổi người dân Việt Nam thì đều thích cái mùi vị của cái gạo tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng. tại cái thời điểm mà chúng tôi thử nghiệm cái gạo cảm quan cái gạo tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng thì tôi sử dụng cái loại cái kernel, cái viên gạo ấy mà nó khác màu so với cái gạo bình thường, nó màu hơi vàng nhạt so với gạo bình thường. Và để cho người dân có thể nhận biết rằng đấy thực sự là gạo tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng, chứ không phải như bây giờ là có các loại kernel mà nó có cái màu giống hệt như cái gạo bình thường. Thế thì người ta đều nói rằng là nếu như là có tốt cho sức khỏe, cũng như là thực sự là họ nếm thử cái cơm mà có cái tăng cường cái hạt tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng đấy, thì họ đều nói rằng là mùi vị nó đậm đà hơn so với lại cái cơm bình thường, và họ thích cái mùi vị đấy hơn so với cái cơm bình thường. Cho nên là nếu như là trong thời gian tới mà chúng tôi có các cái nghiên cứu tiếp tục mà hoặc là hỗ trợ các doanh nghiệp để tự nguyện tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng vào gạo, thì chúng tôi cũng thấy là có cơ hội. Và sau đấy thì chúng tôi đã có một cái nghiên cứu sinh của Việt Nam đã làm cái nghiên cứu về cái gạo tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng, về cái hiệu quả của gạo tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng, và đã có một cái công ty ở Thái Bình hoàn toàn là sử dụng cái gạo và sản xuất cái gạo tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng ở Việt Nam. Họ cũng sử dụng cái nguồn gạo cái kernel từ nước ngoài nhập và sản xuất cái thực phẩm ở Thái Bình, và cũng thu được những cái kết quả rất là tốt đối với lại cái chương trình tự nguyện tăng cường vi chất dinh dưỡng vào gạo. Và như tôi thấy rằng đấy là một cái hứa hẹn đối với Việt Nam, vì là cái sản phẩm gạo thì tương đối là sử dụng thông thường.
Thank you very much. Well, we would need another hour to share my opinion and my experience with the fortified kernels. Let's just say that until the fortified kernel looks exactly the same as the native rice that has been mixed, we are still not there. I am positive. I have seen samples. I've from a few suppliers, DSM, other suppliers that obviously do the extrusion process, and the fortified kernels are very, very, very much developed today. I think the ones that I know are almost indistinguishable, or I would say indistinguishable. I fully agree. They must be indistinguishable from natural rice because of the importance, the cultural importance that the grains and the process to cook the rice has. So thank you for your input. We are running out of time, but I want to listen to Dr. Klaus showcasing one of the many partnerships that you for sure have that influence these large-scale food fortification programs. Again, we are talking on large-scale food fortification as an excellent vehicle to reach more people. So, Dr. Klaus, up to you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think one of the key success for a large-scale food fortification is that, as I mentioned before, that all stakeholders are involved, but also that why fortification? Because the millers need to understand why they're doing this. Very often they see, oh, there's a new standard. We have to follow this. We have to add something that is an extra cost for us. Why do we have to do so? We spend quite a lot of time also explaining why fortification, what is the background, what is the benefit of fortification, because that makes let's say it easier for the millers to understand why they have to do it. And not only the millers, but also consumer associations, press, everybody need to be one way or the other to be involved from the beginning.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I do agree. We have discussed this on the previous panel. So
yeah,
the incentives must be there for the private sector. It can't be purely philanthropy, because it just doesn't work on the corporate world. We must make it sustainable, and I guess it's the work of all of us that are here to ensure that the fortification program is as well has a sustainable business program. So finishing with, we have run out of time. Finishing with RIS, I mean, briefly, RIS, the main barriers to, I mean, in your experience, you are working with many millers. Doesn't need to be specific to rice fortification. But what have been the barriers to the widespread adoption of these fortified stuffs? I mean, we are talking on 70% of the countries in the world have mandatory legislation, and still we are not there. So what is missing?
Thanks, Diego. I think the main barriers, most of them have been raised, is I think first thing is effective regulation is actually an incentive for the industry, and if it's done properly. So in many countries, we are also perhaps designing regulatory systems that are very complex and very costly. So there is a lot of work that needs to be done around simplifying that, because if it's costly, then governments also don't have the incentive or sometimes the resources to regulate. So we need to find ways of doing that. We're doing some of the work in the project through promoting more industry-led self-regulation would be a solution, but also that. Then there are also issues around, there are a lot of costs to fortification, as much as industry complain. Like when you looked at the costing for rice, for example, like when you achieve, if if about 80 to 90% of the cost of rice fortification or any food vehicle is the OPEX, then you're optimized. But in addition to that, what industry faces sometimes a lot of cost barriers that are not necessarily adding value to the product. And this comes from either sometimes excessive importation barriers or trade barriers that come from weak currency and all that. So frequently, many food processors complain we don't have access to fortification. We interpret access to premix, for example, and we're misinterpreting that because they're saying, oh, premix is not available, let's make that available. That's not the issue. What they want is they want to be able to have this premix available near them and in the currency in which they operate, because that can mitigate against any volatility against foreign exchange. And so a lot of work can be done to address those solutions that make quality premix available. And again, quality there is very important, and probably colleagues from class and DSM, Firmenich, BSF, you guys know that it's a waste many times that much of the fortification is done with very poor quality premix and or fortificants, which defeats the purpose. So we need to address that. Another key barrier to overcome is around also, there's probably a great opportunity to look at labeling of food. I think, Lucy, you mentioned that some of the projects you're looking at smaller packaging and all that. I think that's a very interesting area because it actually, in effect, makes it affordable for lower income households when you package in smaller quantities. But then you also get the opportunity for labeling it. And that also improves regulation. So the number of challenges, barriers that come out is, well, besides the obvious ones, which is what industry faces, and Tiago, you covered all of that around, process optimization, around training of staff, skill development, putting in the right kind of investments. Those are what the industry faces. But then what we need to do is minimize other costs for operating businesses that don't necessarily add value to the product that they're doing. These are costs that industry faces on a daily basis, and the more of that you have in a country, the less or the more quality gets compromised, because that's the only way industry then can cut costs. There is a price ceiling. We can say things are expensive or cheap, but what is expensive or cheap? Ultimately, these are commodities. There is a price ceiling at which the consumer is able to buy these products. And if you exceed that, then industry cannot sell this product or bring it into the market. And anything we can do to work with governments, with our partners to simplify and ease things. We shouldn't make fortification more and more complex. We should make it more and more simple. Because food industry doesn't go into the business for the purpose of fortifying. They go into the business of producing whatever commodity they're doing. They are an advantage to us because they are a vehicle or an avenue for us to then fortify. We need the food industry, not the other way around. And therefore, the simpler it is, the more they will incorporate into the process. And we've learned that globally, the most successful, where highest volumes of product gets fortified is salt and oil, I would say. And it's done because it's reached a point of maturity where industry doesn't think about it. They just do it. So if everything looks like a mountain to overcome, then it won't happen. My key message would be keep it simple. Keep it the least barriers you can create for the industry, the more likely fortification is going to happen.
Absolutely, and to keep it simple, we need to involve everyone that is on this room listening to us. So from the very different sectors. Thank you very much, dear panelists, dear colleagues. It was a pleasure to have you. Please stick up for the rest of the forum, the ones that are here. Thank you very much for your attention.